Hello, welcome back to the Momentum Podcast. And Cecilia Rios, welcome back to episode 3 with you, episode 2 here on Practices from Therapy. Last week we talked about practices that we can integrate that you use with some of your clients in handling stress during the season. And this week I'd love to dig in deeper into what you're a professional at, right? You're a professional listener, you're a full-time therapist. So I want to ask you and dive in, is listening important?
Yeah. So listening is very, very important. Very important for our relationships. I think that our communication and listening is the two most important things in relationships. It can make a relationship very beautiful, or it can make it very, very frustrating. Right? So listening, it's important to have overall better relationships. Just like communication is very important. And I think I want to point out, kind of like they're both very important. Just like communication is very important to make your point across. But if the other person is not receptive to what you have to say, you're not going to get anywhere. Nothing will be resolved. So both of them are part of the same equation. The communication, how you express what you want to say, and how the other person is receptive to that message. They're both very important.
What is listening?
Well, I think when it comes to listening is defined as the process of interpreting the language and making sense of that, right? Compared to hearing, I think hearing is like anyone that has the ability to, there's not deaf.
An animal can hear you, but it maybe doesn't listen.
Exactly. Yes, definitely.
So debatable, but for the most part.
Right. Yeah, so for the most part, yes, that would be the case. Right? They're able to listen, they're able to hear the sound.
Right.
But listening, it's another level.
Yeah.
So I think today we'll be learning a little bit more about some listening skills. I do get paid to listen to people, so I think I remember in graduate school, one of the things, they had us go through this activity and to describe one thing that we were good at. And I put listening, and I'm like, listening is very important for this whole program. If I'm not able to listen, I would not be able to do a good job with my clients. And, oftentimes in trainings where like they really emphasize, we are there to listen. We're not there to talk. It's not our time. It's their time.
Oh, man. After some experiences I've had with different therapists, they're like sharing their religious values with me. Or like I don't.
No. That's a no in therapy. Yeah, you listen to what they have to say.
They're not supposed to convert me?
No. Definitely not. No. So yeah, I want to follow your lead on where you want to guide this conversation, because I feel like there's a lot to talk about.
Well, you said first, I want to go further. What are listening behaviors?
Yeah. So we can listen and still not show a behavioral response that says that we actually listen. So some of the skills when it comes to listening and presenting ourselves as an individual that is mindful in their conversation, as we, kind of like piggybacking on our last topic, being a good listener means that you are present. You are present in the moment. That means you are not behavior-wise, you're not on your phone, you're not checking, you're not thinking about all the things that you have to do later tonight.
Your checklist.
Right.
Your what you have to do at work tomorrow.
Right. How do I look right now? Like, all those, yeah. So listening requires a lot of active, mindful, being present. So active listening. One thing is to listen and then check out for a little bit and then come back. It's difficult to be actively listening for hours, right? But active listening means it's a process that we are constantly engaging in what the other person is saying. So behavior wise, it shows as, nodding, expressing that you understand, maybe some facial expressions that present yourself as empathetic, because there's another very big aspect of listening, showing empathy. Are you so present in the moment that you're able to put yourself in the other person's shoes? Really understand their experience from their own perspective. Sympathy is one thing. Sympathy is like, I feel bad for you for what you're going through. Empathy is like, I feel with you. I'm here with you and I feel it. I really understand what you're going through. To the extent that we're able to, right? With the information that is given to us, I always try to tell my clients, like, I cannot imagine being in your shoes, but wow, that must have been super difficult, right? Like if I put myself in your situation, I would have felt like this. And so, this is an example, and as we move forward in this conversation, I want to talk about some of the responses that really show that you're listening and that anyone can use. It's like I'm giving you like little skills that you can, incorporate in your conversations to present yourself as someone that is actively listening.
Let's do it. Let's go there. What are skills that we can build? Yeah.
So, like I said, behavior-wise, right, showing eye contact, it's very, very important. If you're wandering your eyes, if you're yawning, right, it's like this conversation you're not engaged. If you're having a conversation with someone and you're moving around and you find yourself wanting to do different things, you're not actively listening. Being present for the person, and this is why it's so important, you showing them that you love them through your active listening.
Wow.
You're telling them you're important for me, and this is the way that I want to express how important you are for me.
Wow.
So, you don't know it said, I've heard, I think it was in the news, that there was an epidemic in the United States, and that epidemic was loneliness. And so how can someone feel lonely when we're surrounded by so many different people?
Totally.
Right? And I think one of the things is that we never feel heard. Right? I have my teenagers, I can tell you, all of them can tell me I never feel heard by my parents. And I think that many of us can relate in similar ways. We don't feel heard by our friends. We don't feel heard by our parents, by our siblings, by, the people that we care about. And why? Because it is shown through our conversations that you are not worthy of my attention. So active listening is you're showing them that they're worthy, right? This is why therapy is so healing. One of the things is because you're showing them through, active listening that you're there with them, you're empathizing with them, and that whatever they do, you're not non-judgmental, and that you are present with them. They're important because you're present with them. So some of the things, the things that you can say to show a person that you're actively listening, apart from the facial expressions, being present and showing body language that shows that you're present, some of the things that you can say is, for instance, showing empathy, right? Let's say we're having a conversation. You share with me that you're having difficulties with a relationship, right? And a way of showing that you are hearing or listening is by recognizing the feeling behind the statement. So you're telling me I got into a fight with my girlfriend and, we're having difficulties. What's the feeling behind that statement? That's how you show them that you listen to them. So I'm going to challenge you right now. What would be the feeling behind that statement?
Probably sorrow, stress, remorse, feeling of being misunderstood.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you can get it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because you can say, wow, you probably must have felt misunderstood. What? Yes. I felt so misunderstood. I'm like, and so that recognizing the emotion, if you're able to do that one thing, recognizing the emotion in the person's statement,
Wow.
that shows that you are being an active listener.
Wow. That's powerful.
So we always, in therapy, we always try to go back to the emotion, because once it's another term, validating, right? You're validating their emotion. Let's say we're having a conversation and we get into a conflict, right? You're sharing something like, well, you did this and I felt misunderstood.
Sure.
Or, disrespected. Wow, I apologize. I didn't think that you were going to feel misunderstood. Recognizing the emotion, not taking a very, kind of like defensive response, that shows that you're not listening. When we take a defensive response, we're just showing that we're not open to listen and we're not open to validating.
Wow.
So, you can disagree, right? You don't have to always agree. You can say, well, I don't agree with your statement, but I could see what you would feel misunderstood or disrespected.
So it's possible to listen and be an active listener and
still not agree, right? You don't have to say yes to everything and you don't have to be accepting of everything. But that doesn't take away the fact that you can be actively listening to whoever.
Wow.
Yeah. And it goes as simple as I went and got an ice cream and you see their smile, because listening can also be visual, right? You see their smile and they're very happy. Wow, you must really like ice cream. Yes, I love ice cream.
I love ice cream.
Yeah. And it could happen the other way around, right? The person comes to you and has an ice cream and they're having their facial expression is completely shut down. Okay, you hear what they're saying, but you're also seeing their expression, and their expression is saying something different. What is going on? I see you have your ice cream, but your face shows a different expression. So that's part of listening too. Listening is not only, hearing things, but also being able to recognize the emotion and the person's behavior.
The context.
The context, yeah. And it's very, very beautiful once you really practice those skills to be able to notice little things in people, changes that once you validate, once you recognize they change their affect, or they completely change the way they were approaching the situation.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So being open to practicing those things can really help you better your relationships.
So if we notice ourselves or others becoming defensive, what can we do?
I think that recognizing why am I becoming defensive? First of all, right? If I'm becoming defensive because the other person raised their voice at me and all of a sudden I don't feel like listening anymore, right? Then you can communicate that. I think that right now that you're raising your voice at me is not a appropriate way and time to have a conversation, because the other person is not going to be responsive if they're angry, right? So we always tell our clients, you have to calm down first and then make a decision, because we don't make the best decisions when we're angry.
Nope.
So, and we're not open to actively listen, right? We're not understanding. Why are we going to be understanding? Or critical thinking is impacted during intense emotions. So we have to first calm down. And to calm down, we can use some of the skills that we discussed in our previous conversation.
Wow.
Right? Calming down, taking some time to go to your room, exercising. I forgot to say that one for some reason last week, but that's a huge, very important one to cope with stress. And so, yeah, calming down, recognizing what is it about this specific conversation that is so triggering for me, that's making me really upset and not really open to listening. Now, we're not always going to be understanding and like, yes, perfect communication. It's a process. And I want everyone to know that. It's a process. You practice some skills and then you get good at those and then you practice some others and understand that you are not perfect and things are going to go wrong. There's always conflict when we have, one more than two people in a room. So
if we realize in ourselves, oh boy, I'm becoming defensive, my heart rate's going up because of maybe something triggered me. And then all of a sudden, in the moment or afterwards, you realize that was not a mature response. As a therapist, I'm sure, you're building your skills and all of a sudden you realized, well, I didn't handle that one perfect. How do you have grace with yourself in that process?
Well, just understanding that you are not perfect, that you are trying and you're doing what you can, and yes, you will make mistakes and that's okay. It's part of the process of learning. It's just a normal thing.
So if we become defensive, just take a breath, maybe leave the room.
Yeah. And so that's something important that you say. If you feel like you are having like a physical response, meaning that your heart rate is raising, you're becoming very, very distressed, 15 to 20 minutes is the rule to take some time for yourself and calm down. You won't be fully calmed down in 5. So don't try to come back to the conversation 5 minutes later.
That's crazy. It's like this. So I did track for a couple of years in high school, and the principle there was the same: 15 to 20 minutes. That after you run a sprint or a race, you feel horrible,
right?
And oftentimes you want to throw up if you ran so hard. But afterwards, the coaches would say, "Give yourself 15 to 20 minutes." And they said, I've never seen anyone after 20 minutes still be hurting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the reason is because your body actually calms down, right? But you have to remove yourself from the situation.
Like stop running, stop being in the threatening situation. Yes. Leave the room, calm down,
leave the room.
So maybe is it appropriate to say, "Hey, I realize I'm not the most mature, not my best self right now. Is it okay if we continue this conversation in a little bit?"
Yeah, definitely. And it's part of setting appropriate boundaries as well, right? If you are raising your voice, is the other person raising their voice? You know what? I feel like maybe this isn't the good time to continue this conversation.
So it's okay too, even if we might be calm, if the person we're talking to isn't in the best spot. So I'm guessing in therapy sometimes someone gets defensive.
Yeah.
And then how do you handle that if the other, in this case, is their stress is raising to a level that communication is not working?
Yeah, the same thing. You can send them to their room if they're children, but if they're adults, you can't really. And so sometimes it's just better to just say, I need some time. And that means that the other person is going to get time, right? Because if the conflict is between two...
So you can kind of blame it on yourself. Say, is it okay? I need some time.
I need some time to calm down. We can come back to this conversation maybe in 20 minutes.
rather than pointing the finger and saying, you need to calm down.
Yeah. And because that's something that we tell our clients as well. You have to remove the blame.
Wow.
Right? Because that only makes the other person feel more defensive. When you start a sentence with you did, that automatically puts the other person in a defense mode.
Wow.
Meaning that they're shutting down when it comes to listening. So you can actually have an impact on how the other person listen by how you phrase your statements.
Incredible.
So if you start with I, on the other hand, you switch the whole entire conversation, the tone of the conversation, by starting with, I felt, disrespected when you raised your voice at me.
That's so good. I know that's an area I want to grow in. I'm quick to say to people you need to calm down.
Right.
But if it's a stressful...
And I think many of us, because we are not just born with the skills, right?
We're not born as an adult maturity.
No.
Most of us as adults aren't quite adult-like yet.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a very simple one. Like when you start your communication with you,
I love that.
You always do that. Well, guess what? The other person, first of all, is not listening to you, to what you want to say, which is probably like, I feel offended that you always do this. Right. But in that situation, the other person is already looking for ways to attack back, get back at you. Because you started the conversation with, a very, what would that be? Like very...
like judgmental tone.
Judgmental, yeah. Yeah. Blaming response. So turning around the words a little bit by saying, I felt this way.
That's so good.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I want to highlight when it comes to communication, right? Basic concepts of communication is recognizing your emotion first. Research shows that children that learned about emotions from a very early age do a lot better emotionally, but also education-wise.
Whoa, Inside Out works, the movie.
Yeah. And so this is fascinating because when I first started working with children, I'm like, well, do children actually do better with, all the skills that we're teaching them about emotions? Where I went and did my research, and it turns out that not only do they do better as adults emotionally, but they do better like education-wise.
If they understand emotions.
And they understand their emotions. And so as adults, I've encounter adults that don't know how to recognize their emotions, and oftentimes when I asked about emotion, they tell me a thought. Right? How did you feel? Well, es que he's always doing this and that and that. And I said, well, that's a thought. But how did you feel? I didn't feel anything, They'll tell me like that. I didn't feel anything, and already presenting themselves in very defensive ways.
Wow.
Very dysregulated. Adults they don't know how to regulate themselves. They bring their kids to therapy to teach them how to regulate themselves. Regulate their emotions.
I'm sure that goes great, huh?
Well, we have to do family.
Wow.
We have to do family therapy because we have to teach the parent how to self-regulate so that they can model that behavior to their children.
Otherwise, you're like pushing up against this low ceiling.
Exactly. Yeah.
The glass ceiling is super low, like 4 feet tall.
So learning how to identify your emotions so that you can also express it in your communication, and it gives the other person the opportunity to be better listeners as well.
So good.
Because once you identify how you really felt, you can also describe what you want from them.
So good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is so easy, right? When we feel attacked or feel defensive to say, you did, you said, you're not, all these other blaming. But really, that's not our responsibility.
No.
Our responsibility is ourselves to say, right. I feel, or I need, I need to leave. I feel attacked. I feel insecure.
Yeah.
I think I need some time to think about this.
Yeah.
I feel unsure about this decision you're asking me to put in my face and choose left or right now. I'm feeling unsure. Could I have a day to consider the options?
Yeah. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
So, with all this information, same thing as, our last week's episode, try one thing. Is it switching your statements to start with I instead of you? Wow. Right? Or being a better listener by identifying the emotion on the other person's statements and showing validation through that.
So that's a way we can be a better friend, better significant other, better, more effective, I guess is a more appropriate term, more effective significant other, boss.
Yeah.
Whatever role in life we're at, we can be more effective or helpful or loving in those roles when we choose the practice of active listening, of choosing empathy, of using language that's appropriate, taking responsible for our own emotions, of when we notice ourselves becoming defensive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways. So in defensiveness, what are some fruits of defensiveness? What are different ways that might show up?
in conversations.
So I don't know. I'm thinking of sarcasm, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, I asked a question earlier that was kind of sarcastic. Like, I'm sure that's easy, right?
Right.
Sarcasm is a common thing, and many people say, "Hey, it's my communication style." Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there's healthy and unhealthy expressions of sarcasm. Mm-hmm. Is that defensiveness, sarcasm, or what's your perspective?
Definitely. I think that through sarcasm, we say a lot of things that we really want to say, but oftentimes we don't know how to say it in appropriate ways because it can be shameful, it can be embarrassing, and so we show it through ways of, sarcasm, which can show resentment. It can show some built up, negativity. It can show the fruits of some other arguments that people had in the past.
Wow.
So sarcasm can be very damaging for relationships. And when you use it as a playful way and there's no really, nothing really behind it, then, because I use it sometimes. I think that it can be a way of being funny. And I think in my culture, it's very common. Okay. As well.
As well as on The Office, right?
Yeah, as well as on The Office. I got it from there. So it can be funny and like you said, can be expressed in healthy ways. But I think that for the most part, it often shows some kind of, underlying emotion that wasn't expressed appropriately in a regular conversation. And so for me, I try to keep it to just joking around, but
just like salt and pepper, just some seasoning, not the main course.
But I also know that I've used it in other ways to express emotions, negative emotions that I wasn't able to express appropriately. So recognizing, is this something that I wanted to say earlier? Now, it takes a lot of self-awareness, and oftentimes people have a difficult time with self-awareness. I think it's a skill that you can, kind of grow, self-awareness, but that also takes time. So it's a process. Wow. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you just said. Why is it important to be a better person, right? Why is it important to be a better person by being an active listener or a better communicator? I think that when we talk about the impact that those two things have in our relationships and how meaningful relationships have an overall impact on our well-being, mental health and physical health, I think is worthy to pay attention to those things. When we know that have such a big impact on our relationships, and it can make them like really meaningful or horrible for us. Right? We're social individuals. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to be in relationships, have meaningful and purposeful relationships, and we're not able to have those express ourselves in healthy ways, then that has an impact on other areas, right? Mental health and physical health. So yes, it's very important to learn how to communicate. Yes, it's very important to learn how to listen, because that creates more meaningful relationships, which in turn create an overall sense of well-being and happiness.
So you're saying it's really core to our survival.
Yeah.
As social beings.
Definitely, yes.
We are created to listen.
And to communicate well, too. Right? We have 2 ears. I think I was joking with you about this. Like, we have 2 ears for a reason, right? And 1 mouth. Like, we're meant to listen more. And that's just my personal, thought. But I think that we are meant to listen more. In this book, How to Make Friends and Influence Others, one of the skills described there is listening. He says, if you go to a party and you sit around people and you ask them simple questions and just listen, by the end of the day, everyone in the group will like you. Why? Because you were an active listener. You didn't have to present yourself in wonderful ways, telling everyone how wonderful you are, the beautiful life you had to make friends. You just have to listen to them.
Wow.
He says, we love talking about ourselves. So if you ask them questions, you will make friends like in no time. Right? And so not that everyone out there is like, probably, I'm not sure, right? But seeking or wanting more friends. But if that's the case, you can make meaningful relationships through listening.
In this, what you said, this loneliness epidemic. And
Yes.
I know there's a TED talk on that said loneliness is actually more dangerous than being obese. I saw that one time and I was living alone at the time and I was like, oh my gosh, I need roommates.
Yeah.
Because even if I work out every day, if I'm not in active relationship with people, that's not healthy.
And Mother Teresa recognized this epidemic way before it happened, right? She said one of the big problems of the Western societies is their loneliness.
Wow.
And so I think that when I read that back like years ago, I just thought of my works as a meaningful thing to do. I wasn't a therapist then, but then I thought, wow, like just listening to people can be being a companion, sitting with them, being with them, having someone that they can talk to and feel supported to because they had no one else that would listen to them.
Wow.
How crazy is that? Right. And so for me, that was like, whoa, like just providing such a simple thing like listening and being empathetic can have such a huge impact on a person's mental health or sense of worth or, meaningfulness. And so for me, that was just, I was really impacted by that.
That maybe influenced some of your career choice then, that
Definitely.
quote.
Yeah, definitely.
As you shared on our first episode months ago that.
Yeah. So today practicing, active listening, not that I don't get distracted sometimes, don't tell my clients this, but, sometimes thoughts come to your head and you tend to wander in a different direction. This is where mindfulness comes so handy. Coming back, bringing yourself back to the moment. What matters now? This matters now. My client is what matters now. And so it's a hard work. Some people say, well, therapists just listen there, sit there and listen. No, it's actually a lot of work to be actively listening for hours.
Actively processing, thinking about what does this mean for this person?
Yes.
Have I seen these trends in them before?
What's the pattern? Yeah, what's the pattern here? Where does this come from? Reading the body language, like listening to that too, in a way, like quote unquote, listening to what their body language is saying.
Wow.
They can express different message through their body as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for this advice and teaching us how to be more active listeners.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we all can grow in this area. Most of us care more about being heard than we care to listen. And I think that's certainly an incredible way to grow in for all of us. And you gave us some practical ways, some behavioral ways that we can commit to listening.
Definitely. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. Any closing words as we sign off?
Again, just stick to one thing, practice one thing. If it's, behavior, changing, like being more present when listening, paying attention to the emotion behind the statements. I think that one is the most important. If you're able to recognize the emotion behind the statements that the person is saying, hey, I will give you a lot of praise for that. It's difficult. So if you're able to do that, if you're able to practice and actually do it, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Cool.
It's a skill that takes a long time to really master.
So start somewhere is our invitation.
Start somewhere. Yes.
Awesome. This is Dr. Nathan Iverson and Professor Therapist Cecilia Rios signing off for the Momentum Podcast. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next Monday.